Okay, so we're live. I'm just gonna maybe, yep, keep my wings level. All right. So I want to touch on a subject of soloing of this particular tune, and I think it's going to be quite interesting because there's one aspect of this particular tune that makes it a little bit different than anything else than you usually encounter in terms of regular songs with regular chords. So when I think about most of the examples that are coming from the blues harmony, so say something based on the 1-4-5 progression will be in key of G. Okay, so this is my 1 chord, my 4 chord, my 1 chord, my 5 chord. So if I settle on tonality of G major kind of will take me to the most secure places that there are to make something work. So I'll be using G major pentatonic here on 12th fret. So apart from following the chords, we're still in the same key. The importance of every note of the minor pentatonic, E minor pentatonic or G major pentatonic, the same notes, to make it clear. The importance of every single note in relation to the chord changed, obviously, but I had my secure spots because minor pentatonic, E minor pentatonic, G major pentatonic in relation to the key of G has plenty of common notes with the chords that are there. So In this case, I could just stay on these 5 notes and see what fits. There's plenty of time. If I hit the wrong note, it's not that wrong because it's not that far from the chord. So this is what I usually consider like a safe spot, like a certain thing that up until a certain point, as we guitar players learn to solo, we've been given, okay, this is your minor pentatonic, here are your blues and rock and roll licks, and this is what's gonna work as long as you stay in the right key. And after a while, we stumble upon a tune that has something, some kind of chord progression, or even a single chord that feels like someone is pulling the carpet from underneath us as players, and we have no idea what to do with it. And Cannonball Rag is one of these tunes that if we don't have particular tools or a proper weapon to work with, there is no really one trick that we can do to make it work. There's no magical pentatonic scale that will work on everything, because this chord progression is moving forward constantly, and depending on how we look at it, it may be regarded as 3 different keys. It can be seen as a movement through 5 different keys. So if we think about tonal centers and keys, it doesn't really apply in here because they're moving so quickly, right? There is no time to look ahead and plan for something, and that's where the actual chords come to help. The actual chord notes and the movement of the chord, because it's very logical in Cannonball Rag. Let me show you the progression. I'll just kill my loop pedal. Okay, we're gonna work through E7. This E7 goes to A7, then it goes to D7, and then it lands on G6, on G tonic chord. It's not G7, it's G. It's something what we consider a tonic 1 chord. This is our resolution. So it's we can use G6 for nice color, and then back again we go to E7. A7, D7, G. So there is a little bit going on in here, and what I would suggest, how we would split it apart, and before we look at all the intricacies of actual soloing, so working to build certain climax and think of with proper phrasing and the ideas that lead somewhere, we'll just focus on technicalities, how to get into it in the first place, because it might seem quite intimidating, but there's plenty of things that we need to need to incorporate into the solo to make it meaningful and doesn't sound like a series of bad notes or pre-learned parts. So we'll have a couple of etudes, couple of exercises, couple of things that we can do with it, and we'll start with single chord, and we'll look what are the possibilities that we can use on this particular tune, and why is it so great to solo in, and what are the strengths of this progression. Okay, first chord is E7. Usually when we think about this kind of dominant chord, dominant which means that it's unstable, it wants to resolve, it has this dissonating interval that wants to, it wants to go here. This chord asks questions. I'll go back to the comments once we're done with this stuff. Okay, so E7. By default, when we think about the soloing concepts with this kind of stuff, I'll put the E7 chord with a rhythm pattern, a very slow ragtime-ish groove, just to see which notes work, what can we do with it, and what kind of ideas we can put there to emphasize this chord sound. Okay, this is my E7. Okay, we'll start with the most basic idea. We'll spell the chord. What does it mean? We'll just play the notes as an arpeggio from the bottom note to the top note. So here we go. E, G sharp, B, D, E, G sharp, B, D, E. These are the notes that are perfectly fitting with the chord. Any of these notes will work with this chord no matter what. As a starting point, let's just play this arpeggio from the top E, repeating every note. Just to get used to the sound, okay? This is the root of the chord. It doesn't do anything special. But this one, 10th fret, note D. This is 7th of the chord. It's a guide tone. It's the one that makes it a 7 chord. This is the tension note. Okay, let's see what can we do in between E and D. We'll try different patterns and different rhythms. Okay, we have just two notes. Let's add some articulation. Well, I'll use slides and vibrato to make them a little bit more alive. Okay, picking hand. I'll try to differentiate the attack of the notes. Some's gonna be snappier, some's gonna be a little bit longer. Okay, let's move further. We'll broaden the base of Okay, I had a connection drop, but I'm back. Didn't play anything. Okay. Before I play the first note, I have my ring finger on 10th fret, and then I do pick the note and hammer on. Okay, so that's the idea. First thing that we need to memorize are the notes of the G7 chord. So E sharp, E, G sharp, B natural, D, E, G sharp, B, D. Okay, now let's have a look at the chord shape of E triad here on the 12th fret. Okay, so I had my triad. It's just like playing a bar chord, but I omit the bar and I just play top 4 strings. And adhere on the 15th fret on B string. Okay, now we can do the trick. We will add articulation and we'll slide onto the notes of the chord. Okay, now let's have a look at the most powerful trick that will make any guitar player sound like a total professional, like someone who really knows what they're doing. And it's a very simple thing. Okay, watch out, I'm selling the biggest secret of sounding like you know what you're doing. You take the chord shape and thank you, Demoto Professor. The trick is, if we approach note of the chord that we have in here from the half step below, and we resolve onto the note in the right time, it's going to sound like something that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I approach my E note from the half step below. Now my G sharp, I added my 7th here on 15th fret. Although none of these notes belong to the chord, but they are the passing tones. There's something that we take as a tension and we resolve it onto the chord, and it happens in a very short time. We don't have to think of it. We can look at it as a pattern that makes it very, very easy. By the way, used in a Musictron solo of Runaway, Del Shannon. Very old trick, works a treat, used by jazz players a lot. So we have this thing that allows us to resolve onto the chord notes, and suddenly, instead of having 4 chord tones, E, G sharp, B natural, and D, we have twice as much because we have notes that are half step underneath. But it comes with a little caveat. Okay, sorry about that. We need to do this at the right time. It has to resolve at the right point of the bar, so that the notes that are half step below the chord don't sound like the ones that we are aiming for. So I'll launch the E7 backing and we'll do a couple of things with this half step trick. Everything that I played were the notes of E7 chord. So this thing here, I just played 2nd and 3rd string, half step below the target notes, resolving them half step up, and then E on the D string. And here on 12th fret. Okay, that's one of ways, and this is just one position of the chord. This is possibly the point where we could explore different inversions of the chord. Let's think just about the triad, which is first three steps: E, G sharp, B of E7, because it's going to be a little bit easier to visualize just three elements, and we can always add the 7 at any point. We like it's just whole step below the E note, so it's not that hard as we first check where the root, third, and fifth of the triad are. So we'll start here on the 14th fret with what we just played: E, G sharp, B. Then we have bar across second, third, and fourth string. Then there's one in here. So soon. G sharp, B, and E. And then there's just a regular E major that we know in the first position. Okay, now we can use just these inversions as an idea to play something over this chord. So I just use chord. So these are my safe spots. This is something that points me, okay, this is the resolution, this is the very, very secure place. Okay, above the chord, okay, if you know the scales, it's okay. It doesn't hurt, it helps a lot. But the problem is usually the first thing that is being shown is, okay, this is the scale, learn the scale. This is E7, on E7 you're going to play E Mixolydian scale. But the problem is that the scale doesn't come with user manual. It doesn't show, okay, this is the scale, but only first, third, fifth, and seventh note gonna work for it. Well, second also is gonna work if used appropriately. But this particular tune shows that having series of 7 notes doesn't necessarily mean that it will help us. But we have the first level, which is chord tones. Chord tones will work. I just proved that. We can invert them. We can do some articulations tricks. We could also approach every note from half step below to the note of the chord, and it's gonna resolve and work quite well. Okay, now let's see what kind of scale, if any, could we use. And I'm gonna use E Mixolydian. What is E Mixolydian? As I guess it was yesterday or 2 days ago, we spoke about major scales. Take the major scale, and instead of half step between 2 last notes, there's a whole step. Mixolydian is like major with flat 7. Okay, sorry about the connection. This is my E Mixolydian. Sounds almost like a confused major. And I'm using the fingering that I'm using in here. I'm starting with my middle finger, in this case, 7th fret, 9th fret on A string, D string, 6, 7, and 9 on 3rd string, 6, 7, and 9. So it gives us very easy pattern to memorize on the dots, in between dots, dots, in between dots, dots, and same thing on these two strings, on D and G. Okay. Okay, the problem with this Mixolydian scale is that if I play the notes in the order, they sound like an exercise. Okay, if I play them with certain skips intervals, well, they still sound like an exercise, right? And when I play the scale, and I think with the scale, I omit, in this case, if I focus too much on the scale notes, suddenly my chord tones are kind of blurry, because this scale, well, it doesn't have a special colored notes that shows, okay, this is your root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. These are your chord notes, right? So I would use this particular scale and the run to connect my chord notes, or play the scale to resolve on a particular chord note. Let's broaden. Oh, absolutely! It's all about melodies. It's all about melodies all the time. Yes. Okay. Let's stretch the Mixolydian. We need to have this kind of tool because scales are very useful if we want to make a quick run. Right? So it kind of shows where the ordinary sounding notes for the chord are, but it doesn't show us the green spots, the resolution points, right? After we discuss this particular scale, we'll find out there is something that actually comes from the chord tones that makes it even more interesting and fills the gaps between the chord tones, right? Okay. This is my E Mixolydian, and I want to have an extra octave up. So I play it in this position. Okay, E sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D, E, then F sharp on 7th fret, 2nd string, 9th fret, 10th fret, 7th, 9th, and 10th. But the thing is that I want to reach up to E, so the fingering that I like to use in this particular position I kind of play 4 notes per string, but if it's too stretchy for you, you can just change position a little bit. But in general, this is the sound of Mixolydian. Okay, let's see what we can do having the Mixolydian across 2 octaves. By the way, this is not my favorite tool to use. I mean, I do scale runs when I solo, but this is not my go-to way. For some people, it is. There is nothing wrong about that. If they find it that this is what that floats their boat, that allows them to express their ideas, fine. But usually we won't hear too much of scale, too much of scale being played during the solos of the guitar players that are playing in this particular style. Some do. Joe Mathis was one of these guys, but I'd say most of the players that kind of elaborated and made this, put some sophistication into this style, were usually using chord tones and the related tricks with the chord tones. Okay, let's see how the Mixolydian ideas might sound on this very chord. That I try to stick to the scale so much. I want to play something else. I want to add chromatics. I want to focus on chord tones, and suddenly I need to get my mind onto the scale. So maybe I won't be the best example to follow in terms of how to play scales. Anyway, they're gonna be there. They're also the building block for. I mean, the chord tones kind of come from the scale, right? Now. We've already discussed the concept of having chord tones versus scale. Now, let's get back to the style vocabulary and let's see if we can use our blues licks on this particular chord. So, we're gonna think with this chord as a one chord of the blues progression. We're playing blues in E for a very short time in the tune. Right now, for this example, I'm going to play a little longer, and once we got the E7 chord covered, we'll have a look at the A7 chord for a while, and then we'll put this first chord change, this first moving floor, this first turbulence that we need to cope with, and how we deal with that musically. How the notes shift, what are the focal points that make it sound musical, okay? Alright, so, blues licks. Yeah, I mean, the dogs are all over the place, that's how they are. Okay, E7, blues, thing in terms of blues licks. Obviously, it has to work because basically E7 is one chord of the blues progression. Okay, now our second chord is going to be A7, and we'll use absolutely the same concept. It's E7 to A7. We're going to have arpeggios, chord tones, chromatic movement between the chord notes. We'll have also blues licks for the for the four chord of the blues progression, although this thing isn't, but for a while we can pretend it is. and also a mixolydian. A mixolydian. So confused major with G instead of G sharp. So this is my A mixolydian. I might think that it is somewhere there. Okay, now the most difficult part is to be prepared for the chord change, because there isn't too much time to look ahead in there. This tune originally it's an up-tempo tune. So this is our practice tempo originally. So we have around a second and a half to play the idea and prepare the next idea for the next chord. Okay, how to practice it? Well, obviously, we're gonna start slow. And we'll start with some very, very basic concepts to emphasize the difference between the chord. In other words, I can play a single note with no backing track that will make it clear that the chord has changed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm gonna put the bass note on it. Because we don't have G in E7 chord, so this note leads onto another chord. Now, I'm gonna make a little slow backing between E7 and A7, and we'll work on a couple of ideas, a couple of exercises how to make this change happen. By the way, these ideas that I'm showing in here for Cannonball Rag, they also apply to blues, or basically any 1/7 to 4/7 movement. Although it's not too common to find tunes that aren't bluesy that have this kind of chord movement. All right, E7 to A7, slowly. Boom. And now, as we can tell, there's a change in the chord, right? That we need to emphasize playing our line. Let's start with something very simple. I'm going to start with the guide tones, which are the notes of the chord that are specific to the quality of the chord. For the first chord, it's going to be D and G sharp. Here, 12th fret of D string, 11th fret of 3rd string. And they move half step down for E7. It's 12th fret. For A7, it's 11th fret. Okay. Now, we see that this is very specific, a very clear difference, that if we play our E7 chord or our blues lick on the second chord, G sharp note is no longer fitting with the chord. We'll have to use G of sorts. Let's spell the A7 chord and let's see what differences are there between E7 and A7. Okay, so for E7 we had E, G sharp, B and the D. For A7 we're gonna have A, C let's see if we superimpose E7 over A7, how these notes relate to each other. How much of a change is there? Okay. Is there A in E7? No, there isn't. We had G sharp, so it's half step off. Okay. What about C sharp? We didn't play C sharp in E7, but this particular note is a 13th or 6th of the chord, and it actually works really, really well. We'll keep that in mind, especially that we did this chromatic run between C sharp and D. This half step below our 7th is 6, and it actually works really well with E7. Okay, and of course E, well, E is in E7 chord. Now G, we're spelling A7, A, C sharp, E, G. Okay, G isn't a note of E7 chord. So we see that some of the notes went half step to the side against the chord. Okay, and there's a quite powerful thing coming with it, because if we have a look at our phrase that we just that we played over E7, for example, like something like this blues phrase. If the chord moves to A7, instead of G sharp, we're going to play G, and the rest of it is going to work. So, simple trick. I'm going to play major triad over E7 and minor triad over A7. Now, the thing is that minor triad, this thing, doesn't sound like anything that would fit on the major chord or major triad or dominant chord, but actually this B note is a 9 or A. We don't have to remember what it is, how it's called. All we need to remember is that it works. Okay, now let's have a look at the phrase. E7, A7. I'm gonna play E major triad over E. Minor triad over A. Minor. All right, so this is possibly one of those top powerful tools when it comes to shifting chords, because we can keep the motifs, the ideas for the listener. We can lead the listener by the hand. Okay, this is my first lick. I'm making a statement. A minor, happy. Well, it's E minor. E minor over A chord. Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. So, and as you can see, I have not reached for anything above fifth of the chord. It's just a triad. And the thing that I did there with articulation, I used the trick with chromatic approach onto the chord notes. So this is for E7. And this thing for A7. All right. So we're almost there when it comes to seeing what the idea is, that when the chord changes, we shift the tools suddenly that we have at our disposal, but to keep the idea musical, we want to accommodate to the new harmony, but keep the motifs that they don't sound like stamps that we just, okay. Oh, now A. Oh, E. A. In the long run, this is just the same pattern that I played in the completely disconnected in terms of the musical aspect of it. But if I try to stay in the same position and try to sound like a singer that doesn't want to shift their voice up or down, right? And here's another thing. We're gonna build over this chord shape. Oh, no problem at all. We're gonna have a look at some flashy legato licks that might come from it. So this is my triad. This is my E7, and I'm gonna go up to G sharp here. This is the 16th fret, because this is a nice broad interval that I can pull off from. So I'm playing the first string, 16th, 12th, and 12th fret. 12th fret on second string with my thumb. So I have a group of 3 notes that are very easy to play a bit faster. I just play pull off. And as they are in group of 3, we can do the ragtime thing. But because the chord is about to change, let's see how we can change this little run into something that's going to work on A7 chord and the second chord. Okay, so this is nothing else than just triad spelled, right? B, E, G sharp. Now, for A7, I'm going to play G, E, and C sharp. In my case, it's middle pull off thumb. But when I do 3-finger runs, I start with index thumb middle. Or something, I don't know, I watch TV when I do that. So I try to not overthink the order of the fingers, but for this particular, because it's static, no problem. Okay, let's have a look with the chord backing. E7, A7, and here we go. Okay, now we can make this first chord a little bit more dominant because we just played the triad. So instead of B will play D here on 15th fret. So it's going to sound like this. Okay, so this was something that had basically the guide tones built into the line, right? We were playing just chord tones, really. So we see that it's just half step away, right? For E7 here, for A7 here. All right. Now, let's add another interesting chord tone that's been lurking. It's been, you know, peeping through the door, and it's going to be 6 of the chord. And the 6 is a really, really cool sounding note. It's for E chord, it's going to be C sharp. So at this point, we could call this thing as E13 when you have 7, but this particular note is going to work for the lines of E7 chord. And this is 6, and we'll use something like this. So it's G sharp E, C sharp B. Uh, 16th, 12th on second string, 14th, 12th. Now this is going to be for an E chord. For A chord, we're going to just change one note. Instead of G sharp here, we're going to play on 15th fret. Okay, and we'll of course phrase it so it sounds right. So there are plenty of things that we can do just with this tiny little movement. Something that Les Paul would possibly play, which is E note, hammer on and pull off. And if we do it in a swift manner, so there's plenty of freedom to use these notes just to emphasize the movement between first two chords. Okay, now I'll try to incorporate all these ideas. Maybe there's something that I forgot. If I find it during playing for a couple of times, I'll try to elaborate on that. But let's play a couple of phrases between these chords with having all of that. So notes, 6 and 7 of the chord, common tones between the chords, the differences, both mixolydian scales maybe. There's gonna be and of course the thing that I forgot about, very essential, chromatics between chord tones. This is the sound that I'm going for usually. And what I mean by that is that between every chord tone, so E, G sharp, B, D, I can link those notes with a chromatic run, which means just if for example, I have a G sharp and a B here, and I'm gonna fill the gap just playing all the notes. So for G sharp and E, I just fill them with chromatic notes. Then to target E on top, I'll just play 4 half steps below. And then I can play low E using same idea. Chromatic approach with 4 half steps below the notes. How it's going to sound? Of course, sounds drunk because when it's overused, it's always gonna wear off very quickly. But I'm gonna use it in line, and then it's gonna be way more useful than that. Okay, now let's try to play some useful phrases. Okay, and now one of the greatest thing about this chord progression, which is that because it's in the key of E and A, we can bounce off open strings. There's plenty of great things that we can do with open strings for these particular chords. Let's start with some very basic idea. We're going to use open E, and we're going to use the chord tones. So this was my idea for E7, A7, A7, So this was of course overused because again I wanted to show certain possibilities that we have in here. So if we spell both chords on a single string, E, G sharp, B, D, and now I can think of notes in pairs, hammer on pull off onto the open string. kind of the same idea, but with a shifting chord into. This is my A7, so E, played from E, E, G, A, C sharp, E. So, so these are my notes from E7, A7, all right. We covered the open string, that there is one that will work for sure. What if we use the ringing open string and some chord rolls? So as we established, we have E7 chord and the A7 chord have this tritone, guide tones, half step apart. So what would happen if we just play this G sharp and D here for E7 chord? That's 6th fret on D string and 7th fret on 3rd string. Okay, let's see how it sounds in the context. Now let's add second open string. So basically, oh, thank you, Charlie. Got your email. I'm gonna respond to it tonight. Thank you so much. Okay, this is a really nice sounding harp-like chord, and a great thing about this chord is that as we progress, as we roll the strings forward, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st, the second string is lower than the first note that we played, than the second note that we played. So it goes do, de, do, bum. It's a really nice closed sound. So this thing also works really well for these two chords. Well, let's see what's going to happen if we play. Now I'm playing the guide tones 3rd and 7th of the chord, 12th fret, 13th fret, 11 and 12. So it's gonna sound like this. So there's plenty of room to experiment with just this first change. We got chord notes of different flavors. We got open strings, we got Mixolydian scale, we got chord tones with chromatic runs, we got chromatic runs in between the notes. So right now we're just talking about the tools and obviously pentatonic ideas and blues and major chord blues ideas also. Now here's the tricky part, because these two chords could be considered as like, okay, almost like blues, 1 to 4. But now comes the tricky part, because there's another chord. It's D7, and suddenly we have a very definitive shift in the tonality and how the chords change. And well, in terms of things that we can do, it's exactly the same tool set, right? D Mixolydian, chord tones of different sorts, blues licks, everything that we could play on the 7 chord in rockabilly context, of course. And let's see how things would work for D7 chord in terms of open strings, because it turns out that the 2 open strings that we had let's have 2 steps backwards towards the this is the idea that I played for E7. This is something that I played for A. Now chord is going to D. Okay, that doesn't sound bad at all. Next chord is G, but it's not the G7, it's G6, it's tonic G. So we need to resolve it somehow. Just a second. Okay, dog tried to hijack the the live stream. Okay. Until we have G, it doesn't sound like much, especially the last one. So I'm gonna put these chords down, but before we move to the whole progression, let's have a look at the second pair of chords, D7 to G, because these chords are a typical 5-1 progression. This is a dominant chord, it's tense, but it resolves. It doesn't want to go anywhere. It's final, it's being stamped, packed, shipped. Now I'm gonna put some backing for these 2 chords. And let's play a couple of ideas. Okay, now, thank you so much, the Motor Professor. The key trick is to get the voicing of the G chord right, because I'm using G6, so it's G, B, D, and E. These are the notes of the chord, of course. When I play them as a voicing, usually I omit D. I omit 5th because it doesn't really bring any additional information. But if I play the idea like this, that I have a D7 chord, I just played the same concept of sliding back and forth between the chord notes, but of course I accommodate them to the progression of the tune, right? So D7, and these are just triads. So it's not a full 7 chord. It's just F sharp, A and D. Then I move to second, third, and fourth string. Then I play bar, and then I play this inversion, and I go back to G. Another thing that is really useful, and of course it's going to work on all the chords that we have, is playing the interval of 6, because I can kind of use it to give it the chord sound, but these are just 2 notes. So for example, in this case, when I have D7, I play A and F sharp on 14th fret, and then 11th and 10th. And I add chromatic run, so it's on 14th fret, 13th, 12th, and just as I about to hit F sharp and D, I shift to this shape. Okay, and the same thing could be done on G chord. Also on D7, we're gonna have this 6 between C and A. So now, okay, and for G it's 7th fret and 3rd and 4th. So it's one of these. Okay, now let's do something like that. Yes, absolutely. Yes, between the chord tones for one chord, for major chord, we are kind of limited to get the chord sound, because if we're in G and we want to get the G tonic sound, if we want to spell the chord, we need to get to 5th in here. So it's G, B and the G, D and D and a little more that we can do with the dominant chord. So I'm gonna put all these things into use, and there's one more technique that I kind of used during the solo, but I didn't talk much about that. Is that there's a thing called pedal point, where we have a common note in a run, and there's a melody kind of being played around. And what I mean, for example, for the E7 chord, so I'm bouncing, going back to the top note, which in this case is E. And sometimes, if we want to get it a little bit more syncopated, basically the idea is to use the top note as a as a kicking, as a starting point of the phrase. This is where the strong part of the bar is. Useful at certain point, but again, all these ideas only work well when they're stringed together through the progression. All right, let's. I'll put the backing for the four chord progression, starting with E. Okay, so this was kind of mix of all these techniques and okay. Again, it's there's plenty of things that can be done with this tune, and I just scratched the surface. But at least I hope that I managed to emphasize where the hot spots of the tunes are. That's basically playing through these chord changes, that emphasizing them and the movements to the following chord is what makes really this tune great and absolutely fantastic to improvise with open strings, with all the guitar tricks that we can think of, with chromatics and blues scales and blues licks and rock and roll and Nashville twang and finger picking, rolling chords. I mean, everything might be fit there. It's a great tune. It's fantastic to jam over, and something that is absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. Truly appreciate that. So the following ending part of the progression is D7 to G to G, D to G, and there's a turnaround. That's the way I play it, because I want to have the harmony very clear. That it's C going to C sharp diminished to G over D to E7, A, D, G, and this thing happens really fast. So we have to be prepared to play over this turnaround. I'd like to talk about that tomorrow because there's a lot of things going on in terms of this turnaround. We have chords that change every beat in a very high tempo, so we have to have some ideas. So we'll have a look at the lines that could be played over this sort of turnaround. Meanwhile, how I would recommend to practice it. I made a backing track. It's on my channel that you can slow down in the YouTube player by 75% and by 50%, and I think it's really great to stumble upon one concept. For example, say I'm gonna use Mixolydian and Mixolydian with chromatics for this tune, and I want to focus just on first two chords. So say Mixolydian with chromatics. Right now, I just try to restrain myself to stay in one spot. Of course, that was way faster than I would usually do that. But this is that's the idea. Just to be prepared to look ahead one chord, then onto a group of another two chords, and then there's a turnaround. And what is quite important is, again, to discover and learn as many positions and ways to play E7 chord, and just to see how these chromatic notes can be linked together. Because if we join the notes of the chord, we're gonna get the Mixolydian sound that is there anyway, plus some more useful notes, right? So I think of having just I look at the neck and I see all my chord tones, and I think how they move and how I can resolve onto them. So even if the tempo is very slow and I have plenty of time to look ahead, playing long notes, just to see how I can plan the resolution. Well, if the chord, once the chord changes, I want to be on the chord note. This is my chord tone. third of course. Let's try to end the phrase on third of the chord, C sharp. C sharp. And again, E7 comes. So this is kind of like the idea that is meant to be practiced slowly, and usually knowing where the notes are just to get all the technicalities away is a perfect way to just train ear. Okay, these are my notes. I hear them how they should sound. These are my target notes. So again, it comes down to having certain ideas in your head. You can sing it, you can play it, and so on and so forth. Okay, thank you so much. It means a lot to me to have all you fantastic people here watching the streams. Oh. Yeah, of course, obviously, I'd love to. Absolutely. Please get in touch. I'm all for that. So tomorrow we're gonna work on something else, or the same thing, or I'll be happy to answer the questions and do a lot of weird guitar things. And I'm so grateful for all the donations. It really means a lot, because it seems like my beloved work is out the window for now, and we don't really know if the venue is going to be open and when. And we're in a quite curious situation, because we're obviously. Okay, but there are also Irish government guidelines, and we're kind of they differ. So both playing here and in the Republic, it gets a little bit tricky and trickier every day. So truly, about Jerry's breakdown, yes, absolutely. I could actually we could do live stream about Jerry's breakdown. The backing track to Jerry's breakdown is on my channel. So again. Yes, I'll be happy to run through it, because Jerry Reed is something that we can practice but never master. I mean, it was okay, all right. I'll be happy to have an insight into the technicalities, because it also took a while for me to get used to very weird, very different approach with picking hand, especially. I mean, I can't do it as Jerry did without index finger. I'm not sure if I tried, but I learned these rolls. It took really. I mean, it just doesn't make too much sense. And again, every rendition of this tune is different. Everyone plays it differently. Yeah. I mean, for me, this is my starting finger if I do this kind of roll. So, all right, thank you. Oh yes, absolutely. Oh, that's true. There's also there are also old Chet Atkins articles from I don't remember which was the guitar magazine, but they are on the web in their entirety. And there's a transcription of the tune and his commentary, like a whole page of the commentary, and it's absolute gold, because it's a first-hand description of what he's going for, and I think this is definitely worth a read. No pun intended. But if I find, I'm gonna find the link, because it's hosted by some guy somewhere. But it's definitely a must for every player, no matter what the style is. But he goes into brilliant details of both performing and practicing and everything. It also shows how humble and brilliant he was as a player. I mean, how aware he was of his limitations and how he overcame things. So that's absolutely brilliant read. Okay, again, so much. I'm so grateful for everyone to show up, and hopefully tomorrow, if everything lines up, we'll work some more on soloing over this particular tune, and then we'll touch on a couple of other things. Yes, they stay online and they're back, and if they're long, so of course they're not that popular, so they're not suggested by the algorithm, but they are there in their entirety. I don't cut them or anything. So yes, everything could be rewound and reviewed. All right. Again, thank you so much. Bye, guys. Take care. Stay safe.